Welcome back to Ways. I am Mary Ann Okon. I still have with me Messi Bokwo, and of course I have with me I have Neoma Efanga also joining us via Zoom. But tonight on the show, we welcome Omoyele Sowore, who is a prominent Nigerian activist, a journalist, and a founder of Sahara Reporters. Sowore has been a vocal advocate of press freedom and has faced significant challenges in his pursuit to expose corruption and promote transparency in Nigeria. Recently, he joined a pivotal role, or played a pivotal role, I beg your pardon, in aiding the release of a fellow journalist, Ojukwu, who was unjustly detained. Tonight, we will delve into the state of press freedom in Nigeria, the challenge that journalists face, as well as Sowore's personal experiences and insights on the subject. Please let's hear what you have to say, because this conversation is between you and us. Remember, you can join the conversation and send us an SMS or a WhatsApp message on 081 803 84663. That's 081 803 84663. Well, Mr. Sowore, it's so good to have you join us in the studio. Welcome.
For having me.
All right. I said Mr. Sowore is out for us today. Okay. So while you were talking, I hear you, from what I hear you say, I hear authenticity to journalism. But I want to draw attention to the fact that, I wanted to ask what your thoughts were with regards to the way journalism takes place into today's climes, where we have a lot of, like you said, now it's going to be on newspapers, it's going to be on the TV houses and all, to people's hands and all. So everyone is a reporter now. But the authenticity of information that goes out, more often than not, people do not take time to process the information. Everyone is more quick to push out information and then this goes viral and begins to move on before people realize that it's fake news. So more often than not, we have situation of fake news being projected, and even journalists do not take the time to do their research, to do their own due diligence before this. So in your words, what would you say? How has the transition been from when you began as, you started your journey in the world of journalism to what it is today?
So let me tell you this, that what I know about fake news as a phenomenon is very political. It was government's own way of saying, look, we haven't been able to figure out how to wrestle down the news media. Well, let's throw something at them that will be scary. Let's blackmail them into, listening more to us. And that's where, in my view, fake news came from as a phenomenon. But I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. But, newspapers have always made provision for, errors. That's why you have a whole section of the newspaper, New York Times, devoted to errors of yesterday. These days, you can correct the errors even faster, instantaneously, as soon as you find out.
Yeah.
And because news reporting now has more democracy in it, there's a lot of participation. Somebody can say, this is fake news. Before you know it, they will fact check you while you're alive, and they'll find out that, you're putting out fake news. But what I tell people is that, what is the biggest fake news you can get today in Nigeria? Is somebody who reads on NTA that the Nigerian economy is doing well. That's fake news. Why is the government not upset with that? Like, somebody will say fake news is like, oh, Nigerians are doing well. We are paying them very well. Petrol will be coming when there's scarcity. That's fake news, because the person who said petrol is coming knew that petrol is not coming. Just like you were reviewing earlier, that Dangote said there will no longer be need to import petrol. That's fake news, because Dangote himself is importing crude. And I don't know where he came about his own distillation process, that it only distills diesel. What it taught us about distillation is that at different degrees of temperature, there will be petrol, water, vapor, and all that. So there's something fake about the whole process. So, and the journalists that are the ones telling the stories are now the ones who are held account. That's why I say it's political. The guy who exposed Fisayo, FIJ, who exposed custom people, who found their hotels and all that. He's the one who has to go to jail. And the custom people are the ones who can go to the police and report him. Is Fisayo's story fake? No. Is Daniel Ojukwu story fake? No. Today, I went to the Federal High Court in Lagos to witness the trial of a blogger, one guy called it JLS Speak. When they were reading the charges, it was ridiculous. If I was a judge, I would just be like, please get out of my courtroom. It was 3 charges read to him, and he said, this guy has lowered the reputation of Pastor Ebuka Obi by claiming that he's doing fake miracles. Those are the charges. And the judge is like, oh, these are weighty allegations. He sent him to Ikoyi prison until next week. The guy has been in prison for 60...
Sorry, is the burden of proof not supposed to be on the
Exactly.
pastor?
So they read all these charges, and they pretty much saying that this guy on Facebook, on his Facebook handle, alleged that the pastor's miracles were fake. I don't understand why we should end up in court over that in the first place. If the miracles are not fake, show it to us. You understand? Because all these big churches have their own TV stations. Let's follow the person you did miracle with, you understand? It's just like a pastor of Dunamis who said he has a bag of rice that doesn't finish. I don't have a problem with it, but I would like to have a bag too, the Dunamis rice that doesn't finish. Solves the hunger problem in the country. But if I say that the rice doesn't exist and you take me to court, it's ridiculous. Are you getting my point? And this is part of where it gets very tricky. Journalism of credibility. Government, that's why I say that fake news is very political to me. That you just slam, the moment you just slam fake news on anything now, people don't even ask because, and government is very happy about that. The army does that regularly to Sahara reporters or other platforms. Anything you report, you just put fake news. You know, they have a stamp for it in their office. And then when it becomes true, you don't get it, we don't get them saying it is
There's
true
no
news.
rebuttal, there's no
what
apology.
I'm saying is that the way news works now, and this is why it's important to innovate, is such that there's a lot of participants. You can't even get away with fake news. And anybody who is serious on these platforms understand that if you want to remain relevant and with integrity and credible, you have to keep checking, you know. And when there's, a substance that looks fake or erroneous, you can always correct. A newspaper have to wait the next day before they do their print. So they know what they are doing when they say, fake news, fake news, fake news. It is government that is the biggest purveyor of fake news. Fake news came from propaganda. Government owns and controls propaganda. Politicians use propaganda all the time. There's nobody who gives you fake news more than politicians because they are going to promise you that they'll provide schools, they'll provide food, they'll tell you that they'll provide peanut butter on top of, but it was never going to happen. They'll come back 8 years later or 4 years later and they would still keep promising the same way. I am not saying that we should not take care of these things, but fake news is not as dangerous as they make it sound. What I'm saying is that fake governments, fake miracles are more dangerous than fake news.
Let me quickly ask this question about protection of the journalists because, we keep talking about government and the laws that they make, whether it be the Cybercrime Act, whether it be the ones that we've shut down, the social media that we've shut down over and over again. How do we protect the journalist in Nigeria? Because look at what we're seeing in courts. The fact that the judicial system is no longer the last hope of the common person. Yes. It looks like we're, I don't know, in between a rock and a hard place. How do we protect ourselves?
I don't, journalists are so important that they protect everybody. Interestingly, they are the most unarmed protectors of society because journalists have taken down governments. They've told stories that expose the biggest lies. So sometimes I just think that journalism is so divine that you shouldn't even be asking for protection for them. I'm surprised that journalists are even as safe as they are anywhere in the world, considering the enormity of the work they have to do. But I think the society should protect journalists by getting more involved in ensuring that when a journalist is being harassed, everybody's talking about it. It happened with Ojukwu's case. They would have loved to keep him for as long as they wanted, but very quickly, everybody was getting involved. People were preaching about it in churches. They're like, they are holding one journalist. And before you knew it, the IG of police had to do something about it, even though they did it, by first 7 minutes. They said, oh, yeah, you still came with, that's fine, but he's gone, And then later they said, oh, you still have charges, just to remind anyone else that might be in his shoes that we can come after anybody. So I think also it's important that journalists unions also do their work. In Nigeria, I don't like to talk about unions because unions have become part and parcel of the problem. If the labor unions tell you they are going to do something about anything, just know that is fake news right there. But the NUJ should be at the forefront of protecting journalists. But I also understand that journalism is way bigger than what the NUJ even envisaged. That's why I keep saying, there's a friend of mine, Sonala Luma, said journalism is so important that it has to include non-journalists to make it work.
Well, so quick one before we get to Norman over there. Do you think that because all over the world, journalists engage, in practices that hold government accountable, those in power, do you think that in Nigeria that the environment is enabling enough for, journalists to actually hold government accountable?
It's never going to happen. And we must accept that as long as you're in the...
How do you mean?
No, journalists are in the business of offending powerful people. So and as long as you offend powerful people, they are not going to create an enabling environment for you to come after them and take them down at will. So it's going to be a tug of war. I mentioned it on your show that most people say that prostitution is the oldest profession. I disagree. I think journalism is the oldest profession because it was journalists that found prostitutes and reported about them before we knew about them in the first place. So it is just to understand that it is almost like a divine intervention in society for people who are doing journalism. But I also want to clarify that journalism is not about holding government accountable alone. There are entertainment journalists, there are music journalists, there are all kinds of genres of journalism.
So accountability at all levels.
Exactly. There are journalism for kids, for adults, there's health journalists, there's journalists for fertility. Where my street in New York City, where I have Sahara Reporters located, every building had one journalism concern. It's either real estate journalism or journalism of flowers. They just write about flowers a lot. They have journalism of shoes, journalism of fashion. If you travel abroad, you get to airports, you see all kinds of newspapers. All of them are on websites now. So journalism is not limited to just holding government accountable.
Yeah.
But
that's just one.
When we talk about safety, it is within the practice of holding the practices of engaging.
Well,
if you exist in a society that
a Dior company can take you to court.
Even journalism or fashion can get you into trouble.
Yes, Dior can take you to court.
Write about the wife of a governor not dressing properly.
but there's some
So
political,
there's
I'll just write about
political
any
element to
brand.
that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, don't you know about what they call fashion police? Can't you just say, wow, this governor's wife
I think any form of journalism can get you into trouble.
Exactly. So
especially
that's what I'm
if
saying.
it
Nobody's going to create an enabler environment except if they can create their own journalism, in which they're just kissing up to them all the time. You're the best, It's like the NTAs of this world, the FRCN of this world.
You are not going to be dragging
and it's not only that. It's just like in the US. The US has a propaganda arm called VOA, Voice of America. It is not broadcast in the US. It's meant for people, it's like some kind of cultural, system or strategy to get the world to believe that America is always right. Yes.
Nama, you're a journalist in diaspora. Please come in here.
All right. So, Mr. Sowore, I wanted to ask what the journalists themselves, right? You said a lot about government and what other people are not doing. So I want to know what the journalists themselves could do to help to keep themselves safe while reporting, because while they are doing some good to the community, to society, it's also important that they do it within the confines of the law, as well as keeping themselves safe. So what are, especially for young upcoming journalists, I mean, they may start off as street journalism and stuff, but actually now grow to want to be journalists. What are things that they need to pay attention to be able to do this in the proper way and to also keep safe?
You know, I can advise on one thing that I think is very common here. Journalists want to offend and socialize. That's dangerous. What I mean is that you cannot be a journalism, I mean, you can't be practicing a journalism that is critical of government. And when they call parties at the government house, you are there. You know, when they are doing naming ceremony, you are their MC. You know, all this kind of journalism. When you are doing journalism, please define your boundaries and don't socialize beyond those boundaries. And you can also go underground when you sense that things are dangerous, you know. And that's what I did for years. Most people didn't know I was publishing Sahara Reporters until I came out. And because you could also do that, you can anonymously publish.
Yes.
But what anybody should understand with regards to any form of journalism or media practice is that there's nothing anonymous if it's online. There's always some kind of footprint out there that will make them track you down, and they'll find you anywhere you are. So don't ever think that you can. But, you know, there are several ways, you know, and also it's not wrong for non-journalists who cannot participate in the existing conventional unions to also organize around their own personal interests.
Yeah.
Even if they're not registered, so that if something goes wrong with one of them, all of them will cry out
They
at the
can
same time.
rally
Because
around.
that's what I find to be a little disturbing when we went to the police headquarters. They're like, oh, the journalists came as if they are strangers interviewing me. I was like, it's your job that's at risk. The following week, the police invited another set of journalists to come and explain what they wrote about the chairman of the Police Service Commission. It's going to keep going like that, you know.
Wow.
It's a revolving door until you start going to the police station to go and get confirmation, to go and get permission to write.
No way.
Yeah.
Someone is asking a question on our YouTube live feed here. It says, can you ask Mr. Omoyele Sowore how some sections of the cybercrime law in Nigeria is related to sedition law under the military?
Well, you know, the sedition law wasn't actually under the military. It was a colonial law. And pretty much that's what the cybercrime section 24 is all about, that you can somehow annoy a powerful person. So in those days, it used to be the district officers and governors. The colonialists used sedition to protect themselves from critics. And that's what this thing is. But what is interesting is that the Cybercrime Act of 2015, Cybercrimes Act of 2015, has actually been amended as of February this year. But as I told you on your show the last time, the police said they're not aware of the changes that has been made. When Femi Falana appeared in court for a jailette, they told the judge, and the judge, I'm sure, was surprised, like, there are no charges here because this has been amended. But as long as you haven't got into the substance of the case itself, you cannot make that, you know, presentation, or you can't move such emotion before a judge to say, look, this is trash. You know, there are no charges here. And it's true. Because there are 3 charges. 2 of them were put under the Cybercrime Act. And I think the police did it tactically to just keep him detained. And the other one was put under the criminal code, which criminalizes defamation. But the problem with that is that it is not a federal jurisdiction offense. You have to go to a state court. But they know what they are doing. They know that before we get to the point, he would have slept.
So they're just giving it the run
He has
around,
gone to a Kogi
obviously.
prison now, so he'll probably find one of their victims there, Bobrisky.
I want to quickly ask about. I want to quickly ask about our employers, and I think I've asked you that question before. Many of our employers don't allow for us to join some of these unions that you're talking about, even though you berated us already. Many would have said that the umbrella of these unions would help us at least not just agitate on issues like this, but also protect our rights, whether it be our payment, our treatment in the places of work.
Safety concerns.
Yes, safety concerns. What should I mean, you're going to look into the camera, obviously, because you're also an employer. What should they be prioritizing in terms of the people who put their life on the line every day to do this job?
You know, I'm technically not an employer at this point because I'm not
Because you
running
left,
Sahara
but yeah,
Reporters.
you know
But
what I mean.
what I've always prioritized when I was there is to make sure that people are paid well enough. And you know, we suffered where we tried to enter into Nigeria. Our money was seized by Saraki when he was Senate president and all of that. Part of all the strategies they use to bankrupt you, but to also ensure that journalists have healthcare, policies, you know, because one thing that people don't talk about in Nigeria is mental health care. And if journalists who is constantly being harassed will be depressed, will be fearful. Some of them will have panic attacks. You know. Some of them would never even recover from one incident of harassment. So it's also important that if we can find in Nigeria, which is hard to find, that you don't just talk about medical care alone, that you have a mental health care component to it, so that you can keep strengthening them to believe in what they are doing. I see when journalists get detained, and you know, I've met some of them in detention and how they're so harassed that some of them don't even want to go back to work. There was a guy who was kidnapped by soldiers. You guys heard about it, and he had to resign because his employer went and said, "We're sorry," even though the guy was right. So the employers themselves are also part of the problem, because the people who are now running journalism concerns in Nigeria are the same people journalists are supposed to be after.
That's a conversation for another day. But because of time, we have to go. I want to say thank you, Omoyele Sowore, former presidential candidate of the AAC.
I thought you were not going to say that.
We have to say it. We have to say it.
Yes.
And of course, publisher of Sahara Reporters, human rights activist. Thank you so much for being here on the show. We're hoping that you can come back soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming around.
Have a good evening, everybody.